before I had heard the name Leo, I was quite worried because I had heard a little bit of the reputation of Prevost. I had heard about the allegations of abuse cover-up, and I really didn't know what to think about him. And then really over time, as I researched him more and more, I've really been quite surprised in a positive way. It's really hard to tell how far the continuity or discontinuity between Leo and Francis are, and that's purposeful. What a pope does not want, a pope is meant to be a stabilizing force within the church. That's actually the critiques that I think were very fair of Pope Francis. As somebody who tried to, as much as I could, defend Pope Francis, is that he said that he wanted to shake things up, and that's not really what a pope does, or at least a pope ought to do.
I don't think they consulted him. Hey, Your Holiness, here's our list of potential influencers. My favorite is the priest with the pecs in the tight shirts. That's the one on the Instagram, and I gotta have that guy.
By the way, my name is Joe McClane. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Praise be to God in all things. I saw a great video over on the YouTube, Scholastic Answers by Christian Wagner, on how Pope Leo XIV is transforming the world. It's a great, it's a lengthy video. It's about an hour long, but it's jam-packed with great detail. I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes with you today over at the stationofthecross.com/ACT. I'll also include a link to his website, christianwagner.com. He joins us this morning. Good morning to you, Christian. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Praise be to God. I'm alive, and that counts, and I guess that's something. But, hey, I guess you're not in Rome today, so you didn't get invited to the influencer gathering. Maybe we can chat about that in the after show a little bit. I want to get into Pope Leo and your coverage of Pope Leo. As for me and for my house, I was shocked when he stepped out on the loggia. I thought this could only be bad. And then I was deeply confused when both Cardinal Cupich and Cardinal Burke were happy over the election of Pope Leo. Don't know how to interpret some of the things that are going on today. But you've covered quite a bit of him and what he's been saying so far. And so I want to get your take. He's gone to vacation. He's back in the home office. We're expecting an encyclical. What do you think will be coming out?
Yeah, I cover basically everything that Pope Leo has to say. No matter what Pope Leo does, I'm covering it, I'm explaining it, reading it, etc. And really what we've seen from Pope Leo is truly a missional pope. Pope Leo, what he wants to do is he wants to take the gospel and the effects of the gospel and to bring into every single nook and cranny of life. And that's really what he's concerned with. He is a missionary at heart. I was equally shocked when he walked out. When he walked out, actually, my first reaction before I had heard the name Leo, that in that little space of time, I was quite worried because I had heard a little bit of the reputation of Prevost. I had heard about the allegations of abuse cover-up, and I really didn't know what to think about him. And then really over time, as I researched him more and more, I've really been quite surprised in a positive way. So I'm very excited. What's coming next, I think his encyclical is definitely going to be covering issues of evangelism, issues of mission, things like this. I don't think he's going to take any sort of pet project. I don't think he's going to cover a specific issue in Catholic social doctrine or anything like that. It's been pretty typical for pontificates, at least going back to Leo XIII, to do a very general, a very broad type of encyclical for your first one, and then in your later encyclicals kind of draw out each one of the details that was discussed in the first one. That's very typical for popes to do.
So the rumors that Francis started an encyclical and then Leo is going to finish it, you're not thinking that's going to be the case?
I have not really heard those rumors, but that would be quite shocking to me. The head of the Augustinian order, he commented on the issue. He knows Prevost really well. And what he said is he thinks it's going to be on mission, evangelism, something like that. And he phrased it as if he was going to be writing his own encyclical. That's not something that popes always do. It's actually a little bit more on the rare side, especially recently, for popes to write their own encyclicals. It's something that Francis did a handful of times. Benedict did a lot more. John Paul II didn't really do it as much. But it seems like he is very in on writing his own stuff, especially the addresses and homilies. The rumor is that he writes those. I don't know if that's exactly true or if he actually does use speechwriters a lot more than we think. But either way, the encyclical, it said that he's going to write it. So I haven't heard that at all, no.
So if if they use ghostwriters, how involved are they in the process? Do they say, hey, listen, this is my outline, this is the stuff I want to talk about, give me a draft and we'll go over it? Or do these ghostwriters show up with their own ideas and then they pick through them? Or how does that work?
It depends on the Pope, really. It's everything from, I believe John Paul II did a lot more of the outlined approach to things. And then with other pontiffs, it might be they're giving them a sort of draft after a general sort of thesis of what they think they would like to see in the encyclical. So it really depends on the Pope, and we wouldn't be able to be privy to that process unless there is some sort of biographical revelation. Somebody does the research, talk to the people, ask them, oh, what was going on with this and that encyclical. It's not like it's secret knowledge. It's just knowledge that people usually don't explicitly seek out.
Yeah. Okay. So when I think of Pope Leo making comments on continuing on in the Francis, vein of synodality or what have you, Laudato Si, there's a number of issues. I mean, there's an upcoming, I guess, there's a gathering of LGBTQ that's happening in Rome that's going to be upsetting a lot of us in the coming days and weeks. So how do you see that? When Pope Leo speaks of synodality, is he speaking of it in the same vein as Pope Francis did? Or is he trying to correct the definition? Because a lot of us felt that Francis took synodality way too far, beyond the bounds of what is historically and traditionally a synod of bishops. Is Leo correcting that? Is Leo with Francis? Where do you see him?
It's really hard to tell how far the continuity or discontinuity between Leo and Francis are, and that's purposeful. What a pope does not want, a pope is meant to be a stabilizing force within the church, and that's actually the critiques that I think were very fair of Pope Francis. As somebody who tried to, as much as I could, defend Pope Francis, is that he said that he wanted to shake things up, and that's not really what a pope does, or at least a pope ought to do. A pope ought to keep stability within the church. So I think it's very purposeful on the part of Pope Leo that he is trying to not have any sort of counter signaling of Pope Francis. So what we're really going to have to see is we're going to have to read between the lines. We're going to have to see how things practically play out. As to the LGBT Jubilee, a lot of people, it's very hard to understand for a lot of people how Jubilees work. Jubilees are very strange things, and anybody involved in Jubilees, they want to place themselves in a higher light than actually a Jubilee requires. A Jubilee can be organized by the church. It can be organized by private groups. You were mentioning earlier that you didn't get invited to the Jubilee. Well, that's because you don't need to get invited to a Jubilee. Anybody can just show up to a Jubilee. If there's somebody in Rome right now, a social media person who is taking videos in Rome and said, oh, I'm at the Jubilee, they didn't get a special invite. Some of them probably did for a private audience to the Pope. But really, anybody can show up to a Jubilee, and really anybody can organize a Jubilee if they feel like.
Well, as far as that particular event goes, and anybody who had been invited to it, I mean, good for them. I don't hold any animus towards them, but I just think it's kind of funny, and almost in some ways it's a little bit cringy, this whole influencer culture thing. But I'm an old man now, so I find stuff like that cringy. But in general, I wonder, and I'd love to get your comment on this too. Is one, your thoughts in general, but also I just can't see Pope Leo having anything to do with these events. Like, I don't think they consulted him. Hey, Your Holiness, here's our list of potential influencers. My favorite is the priest with the pecs in the tight shirts. That's the one on the Instagram, and I got to have that guy here. What do you say, Pope Leo? I just don't think he's at all involved in the process. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. This is going to be the dicastery for communications. So it's just a question of who are exactly the aides there, who's in charge of these sort of processes of looking for people. I was actually having a chat with the social media guy from Catholic Answers over the weekend, and he said that the way in which they reached out to a lot of these influencers that they did want to have in the more involved sections of the Jubilee. So, for example, the private audience with His Holiness, they reached out through Instagram DMs, and they missed the DM because it was filtered out of their normal mode of communication. The way in which I've heard the dicastery for communications reaches out to people is very, very strange. I don't know what's going on there, but it's definitely not a very clear and certain process. And it doesn't seem to be anything which is explicitly guided by the Pope. I think the Pope probably has a lot bigger things to worry about. It doesn't seem like he's really organizing many of these audiences himself, as he shouldn't. That he shouldn't be organizing all of these things himself. He should be trusting other people to do that because he's the Pope and he has a lot more things to worry about.
Yeah. I think a lot of us would love to see Pope Leo change the pace of the pontificate since even Paul VI, right? I mean, like the traveling of the world, for instance. I'd love to see him sort of hang back in Rome and I love the fact that he went back to Castel Gandolfo. I thought that was a great move. I think the people appreciated it for sure. But, not get on that plane and not be a jet setter. I think that he needs to go back to the old school way.
Absolutely. He made a comment actually when asked whether he would travel to America. And he said, no, not for a long time. I have stuff to do here in Rome. And I think that should be the mission of any pope. I think that should be the way in which they think about their own work, because there's obviously a lot of problems within various different curial bodies. And the curial bodies, as I mentioned before, a lot of people are focusing on the encyclical, but really the curial appointments are going to be the more important things to focus on, is who are going to be the people who are going to tell him about who the bishop, give him recommendations for bishops, or who are going to be the people who are going to be giving doctrinal judgments on heterodox professors, who are going to be all of those people who are going to be running the day-to-day business of Rome. That is much more important than what he says in this address or this homily. As much as I like the addresses and homilies, and as much as that is really, I believe, my mission to spread awareness of his addresses and homilies and what he says in them, really it's going to be the curial appointments and the reform that he's going to do of that. That's going to be really the initial hallmark of the Leonine papacy.
And he just met with Fernandez for the 6th time in his pontificate so far. And we're all wondering, does Fernandez get to keep his job? I mean, if I'm Holy Roman Emperor, no, Fernandez does not get to keep his job, Your Holiness. He's got to go. But a lot of people say he might just let him live out his 5-year contract. Do you think that'd be the case?
I don't know what the case is going to be for that. I think that would be I don't know all the details. Obviously, I'm not the Pope. It's really a question of whether it would be prudent to permit a certain evil that a greater evil doesn't come about. We think of this idea in the history of Catholic political thought of tolerance. Tolerance isn't the modern notion of tolerance. Tolerance is we're going to let an evil be. It's kind of like when you got shrapnel in you, and if you try to operate on the shrapnel, you're going to do more damage and you're going to tear up the tissue. And sometimes you just need to leave the shrapnel in and leave the bullet in for the time being, just so something bad doesn't happen. So I don't know all the details of whether it would be a prudent decision or not to tolerate his position where he's at right now and kind of leave that in there until you can just naturally move forward, not to shake the boat, not to wage war on your own curia, but to really keep very tight-lipped about it, or whether it's going to be a sort of thing where he does want to remove a lot of the rot.
I want to follow up what you said right before the break and about these curial appointments. It just seems like we've been living 12 years of lopsided justice. Father Martin gets to continue to tour the world, say whatever he wants. Ralph Martin gets the can. Father Marco Rupnik's artwork hangs in the crypt of St. Padre Pio, still incarnated in his diocese and still has favor. Bishop Strickland's living in exile. I mean, I just think a lot of us are so sick and tired of what is obviously injustice that we want to see dramatic, swift justice, swift change. And I think if Cardinal Fernandez kept his job, for instance, I think it would continue to scandalize and further create division within the church rather than unify the church. Do you think it's fair? I mean, I know I'm not the Pope and my opinion doesn't count for any darn thing. But at the same time, I can't imagine how it would be a good thing for Fernandez to carry out the rest of his 5-year term. Just to use him as one example.
The Habsburgs, their plans are measured in centuries, right? And there's a lot of groups where their plans are measured in centuries. And we always know that when it comes to big decisions and big movements, that these things require time and methodical patience and discipline. And that's how the crisis in the church happened. There were people who were methodically disciplined in attempting to overthrow orthodoxy in many different areas of the church. And that's the only way in which we're going to have the retaking of the church. The retaking of the church is not going to happen through bold and bloody revolution. That's just not the way in which these things work. The way in which these things work is people need to have sort of self-discipline and self-control to be able to have these positions, not in a way in which you're lying about your actual positions, but in a way of, the sort of style of infiltration. That's what needs to happen. And making very bold and very risky moves that piss off a lot of people who are your enemies and who want to set you back years at a time. I just don't think that's actually a prudent thing to do. So, I mean, I would respectfully disagree on this point, but I think what's important is that both of us, we agree with what the problem is and we agree with what the final end is. So we can have these discussions where we disagree on these points.
So ultimately, you think Pope Leo will come out very measured with whatever curial appointments he's going to make?
Yes, I absolutely think that it's going to be a measured approach. Pope Leo, a lot of his background is actually in studies of leadership and the way in which leadership works. And I've read some of what he has to say on this, and I actually really like it. I actually think it's quite brilliant what he's had to say in the past on leadership and his idea of leadership. But I really do think he's going to take a very balanced and very methodical approach. And I do think that he realizes what a lot of the issues are. And I think we've seen a lot of what his principles are so far. But it's really good to not shake the boat in the beginning of taking on a new leadership position. That's something that he emphasized to my bishop, Bishop Martin. I'm in the Charlotte area, so I had to suffer the displeasure a lot of what my bishop was doing. But to not shake the boat in the beginning, to get used to the position, to understand your flock. That's what he's emphasized with other bishops who have entered into new dioceses. I think he's going to practice the same thing with entering into this new position.
Okay, so do you believe then that it'll be some time? I don't know how much time. You can come up with any number you want, a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is. Before he decides, okay, there's been enough time. I understand fully all the players and all the issues. And now I'm ready to roll out the changes, the reforms, or whatever that I feel are important. Do you think there will come a time where he becomes more decisive?
I think what we have to realize is that when it comes to Pope Leo has only been in Rome for around 2 years. That's when he was made the head of the dicastery for bishops. Being in a place for 2 years, you don't know much, especially in a place like Rome where there's so many complex interwarring factions and figures, and especially with the job that he's taking on now as Pope, it's a very steep learning curve to understand these things. It's not like Pope Benedict, where he had been in Rome for decades and he knew the players and knew the issues. It was a very short time for Pope Leo. So I do believe that he's going to be a reforming Pope. I think that's how he's going to come down in history. He's definitely indicated that this is what he wants to do, but I don't think it's going to be here and now. He's going to give it a little bit of a break to understand what's actually the problems and to understand what actually is going on.
He does seem very sincere as a man, and I would say that Francis often came across as someone insincere or duplicitous. In fact, I knew a lot of people who met him personally who would come away with that feeling. And not to disparage his character, but just to characterize the differences, the contrast here. A lot of people, when they meet Leo, they tell me, and I was just with a group that was in Rome. We were in Rome just a couple of months ago, and they met him personally. Very sincere, very personable kind of a guy. And I think that's hopeful. I mean, I have hope that he's a sincere man with his heart in the right place. My biggest concern is whether or not he has the fortitude, the courage to stand up to those intense personalities with agendas that surround him.
Yeah, I think that this has been a story of the pontificate since St. Paul VI, because as much as many people want to criticize St. Paul VI and St. John Paul II, they actually did really have the fortitude to stand against the tide in many different ways. I mean, there were many, many different essential aspects to Catholic life, doctrine, practice that we would have lost if they did not, in their own pontificates, wage war against the vast majority of their own bishops. I think somewhat Benedict XVI, despite being much more orthodox, he wasn't as willing to wage this sort of war. So I think you're absolutely right that when it comes to the Roman pontiff and when it comes to what are going to be the actual practical fruits of their pontificate, it does have to do a lot more with a personality thing than it does anything else. But I think that Leo, he has a lot of the leadership experience. He was head of the Augustinian order before becoming a missionary bishop, and having those leadership positions, really, it is like being a bishop of an extensive international diocese that many of the diocesan bishops don't even have experience of. Being the head of a religious order is huge. So I think he does really understand what is necessary when it comes to reform and how it gets done.
Is there anything besides the encyclical and besides the appointments that you think is coming our way sooner rather than later from Leo?
I really don't know personally. There's the news in Rome. It's a sort of little IV drip. You get drip fed a lot of the news, and the schedule of the Pope and what the Pope is supposed to do publicly. There's this saying that you don't know months ahead, you don't know weeks ahead, you don't know days ahead. The only time you know that the Pope is doing something is when he's doing something, because that's just how traditionally the scheduling works. So I have no idea. Really, a lot of this ends up being mere speculation. It's fun to speculate, and there are things that we can know in broad outlines, but really, no, I don't know anything else besides those two things.
Well, okay. I think they're making things calm is a good change from the last 12 years, but
Yep.
I'm still going to hold on to my position, which is I want to see some action. I want to see some action and some correction. Praise be to God. But let's pray for Pope Leo and his discernment and wisdom in his position. I can't imagine how difficult that job would be, and I'm glad I don't have it. Hey, Christian Wagner, glad you're on the team. If you can hang out with the after show a little bit, I want to get back to the influencer thing in Rome.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.